That says live. Assalamu alaikum, my brothers and sisters. I hope everyone is well today. Today I have a very special guest on, a Revert brother based in Germany who goes by the name of Abu American. Assalamu alaikum, brother. How are you? Hope you're well.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am very good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good, thank you. It's a nice day here today, which is very rare, so that's good.
Beautiful here too. It's absolutely stunning weather.
Good. I think your content is really fascinating. I have watched some of your content and you seem very strong in your opinions. And I like that. I respect that because you know, like where you stand. I know where you stand on a lot of things. And whether people agree with you or not, you move according to Islam. So for Muslims, at least, your position can't be questioned because what you talk about is halal. You talk about everything that is halal and is in the Quran and hadiths. So like I said, I have a lot of respect for you in that aspect for sure. Firstly, I wanted to talk about your upbringing. Did you grow up in a Christian household? How did you become Muslim? Can I ask about that?
Yeah. I mean, I did grow up in a Christian household. I mean, how Christian are people nowadays? You know, they identify as Christian, but the actual practice is probably what we can call non-existent. So I did grow up in a house that was Roman Catholic. My father was actually Baptist, but he was completely like devoid of religion in that sense. He actually identifies as an atheist now.
Okay.
And I became a Muslim in Germany. A friend of mine, he went to the first Gulf War, and he came back from Saudi Arabia as a Muslim, and he's a white guy. And we started talking about Islam and whatnot, and I was just completely blown away that, you know, a white guy could be a Muslim. You know, I was like, how's that possible? You know, Islam is only for Arabs and brown people. I was like, you're white, it's impossible. And so that kind of led me on the path to like exploring Islam, because I realized at that point that there was information on Islam that I had that was incorrect or I didn't know altogether. And I've always been kind of a person who, like, you know, geeks out on information. And that was the path of me becoming Muslim. That was back in 1998, actually. I took my Shahada in 1998.
A long time. Yeah. Wow, so you've been Muslim for quite a while then? Oh, you seem to have lost
that. Probably longer than a lot of these guys have been alive that are on YouTube.
Yeah. No, I was born before then, so yeah, not that long before, but I was born before then, yes. So you do know your fair share. Did you do a lot of research before you became Muslim?
A lot of research. You know, I think the ulama, they always say like the best dawah is your personality and your character. And so when I went into a community that was like very, very well knowledgeable, they were, you know, had the imam that was very active in teaching the community. And, you know, based upon knowledge, you know, qala Allah, qala Rasul, nothing else, not his opinions, nothing like that. And so the community, even the people who were opposed to him, they were quite knowledgeable in the religion. And so that reflected in their manners. And so I wouldn't say I did a whole lot of research. The research really started after I became Muslim. But what really was most important was the dawah of the characteristics of the Muslims of that community. Alhamdulillah, that community, you know, I have a brother, his name is Yahya. And he says, you know, we're going to spend the rest of our lives looking for a community like that. And he's absolutely right.
It's true. I've heard that quite a lot from reverts, that it's actually Muslim people around them that guide them, because they know the characteristics, like you said, the way they carry themselves is really good, and that's great. You know, it just should say to fellow Muslims that carry yourself in the right way and people will follow. So
indeed. Let me just take this moment to say for your viewers, guys, Twitter is probably the worst place, you know, in terms of behaviors, where we have the largest amount of eyes on us as a community. So if you're on Twitter, please behave yourself. It's dawah, and a lot of people are watching, you know, so it's not a good look sometimes.
No, definitely be respectful to each other as well, and what you've got to say. Did you have a sort of misconception of Islam before? Is that why you never really read into it? Was it because of, obviously, mainstream media has a part to play when it comes to Islam?
I mean, back in those days, you know, the internet was like still in its infancy. You know, we had internet, but it wasn't like a big thing like it is now. There were no cell phones. I mean, there were cell phones, but it was just like such a, you know, it's not like you understand them in terms of smartphones today. So media did play a role. There was there's always been I mean, we can go back to the time of the Messenger of Allah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We've always seen like an anti-Islam type of rhetoric and behavior. That's always been there. That's always going to be there. It's one of the ulama said that this is the manhaj of Allah, that when you're upon the truth, people oppose you. And when we look at all of the prophets, all of the messengers, they were always opposed by their people. You know, it's rare that a prophet or message had large amounts of people following them. So yes, to answer the question clearly and directly, there was a lot of misconceptions and misunderstandings, but that's to be expected, I think. You know, this is where hidayah min Allah, this is where that, you know, guidance is from Allah comes in. You know, if He allows you, you know, to have that fog lifted from your eyes, you know, so you can see the truth.
Yeah, that's true. That's great.
So I was
that's
blessed in that. Alhamdulillah.
A great blessing, and I'm so glad you're part of the Ummah. It's really nice to be part of you. So you're based in Germany just now. Why did you move to Germany from the US? And it's not a Muslim country. Did you not want to move to a Muslim country? I understand the living in Germany is pretty good.
Yeah. So living in Germany is just kind of like a habit now. We came here as a family for United States military. You know, the United States military has a pretty strong presence, even to this day, inside of Germany. They have since the end of the Second World War, actually, arguably since the Second World War, when they, you know, when they were fighting the Germans. And so that just continued on as like a family tradition, because I mean, I catch a lot of smoke. Well, we stopped now, but we have a family tradition of military service, so that we know how to fight as a people. And so the place we usually end up the most is Germany. And so I just kind of ended up staying here because it's a great place where in terms of like being left alone, I don't get bothered by the police. I don't get bothered by, you know, local weirdos or whatever else. I go to work, I come home, I do my shopping, and I see no stress, no problems whatsoever. As for living in Muslim countries, I lived in Qatar, I lived in Saudi Arabia, arguably UAE as much as I've been there, but it was difficult. I actually did an entire live show series with the brother Yahya that I spoke about earlier on my channel. And we talked about the experiences there. And my experience was such a difficult one. I decided that if I ever live amongst the Muslims again, astaghfirullah, how horrible that sounds, that it'll probably be like the Malays or the Indonesians, you know.
Can I ask why?
It was just very stressful. It's a different mentality. You know, one thing that people don't speak about, and I talked about this in the show, is how there's a cultural difference that's not totally bridgeable by Islam. I mean, because people and their culture, and I call it goofy culture on my channel, but some people's the culture is so strong that it supersedes and overrides Islam.
Yeah,
and
that's the same with Pakistani culture. It's the same. Yeah.
Yeah, and so if you can't bridge that with Islam, then now you just have an absolute foreign cultural divide. And I found that in the Gulf countries, in the Khalij, me as a, like, you know, born and raised American, but I accept that Islam takes superiority over everything. And so I'm willing to let go of parts of my culture in order to practice the religion properly. I found that when I went to the Gulf, this wasn't the case. That people are willing to, like, you know, hey, you know what? Well, this is how we are culturally. I know what the religion says, but culturally, blah, 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 whatever else. And so that led to a lot of conflicts and problems. I ended up in just a lot of like bad situations and stress because disappointed, failed expectations and whatnot. And so it started to actually affect my iman, you know. And so I just said, hey, you know, I need to get out of here.
That's the first time I've ever heard someone speak about like that, about Saudi, about just general UAE countries. Usually everyone's like, yeah, it's hot, it's Muslim, come, it's great. So it's refreshing to hear the other side of it, because definitely culture does play a part. Sometimes it's in Pakistani culture for us, culture and Islam, it gets confusing. And when you're born Muslim, you don't know sometimes what's culture and what Islam is if you haven't really looked into the religion properly.
I would agree.
Yeah, so that's refreshing to hear. In Germany, is it quite liberal over there in Germany? It's nice to hear that you're sort of left alone, which in the UK can sometimes be a problem.
It's quite liberal here. Nobody bothers you. I mean, it's a crazy society. I think we see now on the internet, like, you know, there's like this entire clash of culture things taking place. I think it's just a matter of time before it happens here in Germany also. But for the most part right now, there is still a considerable degree of like cultural liberalism that allows you to do what you want and how you want. That goes from Islam to the extreme opposite end of the spectrum, where you have like the rainbow flag people and all sorts of other stuff going on here too. It's a very
Right.
strange place and strange time right now, I think, globally.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think it's not just to one country. I think everywhere is just a bit mad right now.
Yeah.
I hope it calms down, but for me, I think sometimes it's just going to get worse because that always seems to happen. It just gets worse,
Yeah.
doesn't it? You never see a change.
It's human history. When we look cyclically at the behaviors of humans, we're probably heading into some sort of like weird social conflict. How bad it will be this time around, Allahu alam. But I think we're probably heading towards something negative relatively rapidly, and Allah knows best. It seems like something's about to snap. France looks like they've already snapped, but that's a different conversation.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I've never been to Germany. It's definitely been on our list since me and my husband got married. We've always talked about going. Never had the right time. Kids came and things like that. So it's somewhere that I definitely want to visit.
It's an amazing place. Let me ask you something. If you don't mind me asking a question, in terms of like travel and children, what would prevent you from actually going? I mean, is it the actual pregnancy itself or logistics?
No, we have traveled. We've been to Turkey twice, and we've been sort of around the UK. But I got pregnant in 2020, and she was born in 2021. Then I got pregnant again in 2021. She was born in 2022. So sort of like, they were both really young. There was a stage where they were both under 2. So it's sort of, we went to Turkey when I was pregnant the second time, and then after she was born, we went to Turkey again because we kind of knew what was going on. So we are planning to go again, but there's also like, it's timing. My husband's working as well, so it's sort of trying to plan around it. I mean, I've heard you've got children.
I've got 10 kids, so that's why I asked.
Yeah, it's like a mission just to go, out the door. So never mind away on holiday. So you sort of have to plan these things. But yeah, definitely want to go. When COVID hit, we were thinking about coming to Germany then. It was that time where lockdown was lifting and not lifting. And I think you had to get vaccinated to come to Germany. And we
they
went
went
at
kind of
that.
nuts here with that.
Yeah, so there was a whole bunch of stuff with that. So we ended up going to Belgium, and that was great actually. We didn't have any kids then, and it was good. We went there, and there's a big Muslim community there as well. So if anybody wants to. Yeah, and we didn't know actually when we got there. It was such a nice surprise, and we were like, "Oh my God, there's so many Muslims and so many places to go." So I would definitely recommend Belgium if anybody hasn't been. Sorry, we went off topic, but yes. You've got a family life, so if I'm not mistaken, have you got 3 wives or 4 wives?
I have 2 wives. Unfortunately, one wife, we did distance marriage so long, and it would just turn into like such a huge and like, protracted stress for being in a distance marriage for 6 years that we recently, split. So I have 2 wives currently.
How do you balance?
Like years, it's been 3.
Okay, so it's been 3 years. How do you balance that? Are they all hijabis? How do you balance between 2 homes, if you don't mind me asking?
Yeah, we all my wives all wear hijab. Sometimes they wear niqab. I mean, one wife, she always wears niqab. My other wife, sometimes she wears hijab. Sometimes she, not when I say sometimes wear hijab, she doesn't go out without hijab, but sometimes she wears niqab, sometimes she doesn't. Let me say it like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's a discussion, or not a discussion. That's not a topic I really go into with them. As long as they're wearing hijab and they're properly covered, I don't really, just to expand on the conversation, I don't really get involved in that, because I follow the opinion of Sheikh Al-Albani, on this topic of niqab. So, that's generally their choice, as long as they're covered properly. Yeah.
Yeah. How do you balance living between? Do you live between 2 households? How does that work?
I live between 2 households. I change houses at the time of Maghrib. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So
that's great. It's something before. I would be like, oh my God, when I was a lot younger and I didn't really read into it much, I would be like, I would never do that. That's not something that I would do. And now I read into it more. I can understand how it can work. I can understand why men and women want to do that. I've spoken about this before. I've heard a story my mother-in-law told me of a wife and a husband that got married. The wife couldn't have children. He wanted to get married again. She was happy with that. They got remarried. The second wife had children, and they all lived really happily. The first wife was also viewed as the mother figure of the home. So, and I thought it was such a beautiful story. And I was like, oh, they were like sisters almost then, you know, because they were all sort of together. So I know everybody has their own way of living.
Yeah.
In terms of doing that. So yeah, it's really interesting to me. I don't know if I could do it. I think that's something that would have to be a topic of conversation before you got married rather than after you got married. But yeah, it's definitely
it's definitely a topic for before marriage. I tell guys this all the time. It's like you can't come in and try and change like the entire expectation of the marriage after the fact. There should be that understanding prior to marriage. Absolutely. In terms of like, you know, the wives and whatnot, I mean, I think it's my humble opinion.
yes.
I'm not a woman, so I can't say, but I think women overthink this entire topic and this entire issue of polygyny. Like today, we're going to be together. Everybody's going to be together. We're, you know, my other wife's coming over here. We're all going to visit. We're all going to sit the day together and whatnot. You know, this happens regularly. It's not as complicated or as hard, I think, as a lot of women make it out to be. I think that initial feeling of jealousy and fear, whatever else, and maybe going through, you know, the minds and the hearts of women. Like, again, I can't claim to speak on behalf of women. I think once you get a guy who basically can deal with the situation well, which I hope every woman marries, a man who can deal with situations, complicated or simple, very easily and well, it makes it easier for her. Because there's two parts to this, and I talked about this on my channel. It's like you have to marry a woman who's good at self-care. When I say self-care, that can't be a woman who like depends on you to emotionally stabilize her situation. That doesn't mean you got to be crazy and destabilize her, you know, her emotional situation and just be like, sucks to be you. I'm acting like a weirdo husband, you know. But we're talking about two reasonable people married together. And therefore, you know, he's acting reasonably and she's acting reasonably, and therefore it makes like a very good balance, you know. And if you bring in another reasonable person into the relationship, then it should be okay. But I think a lot of times guys, you know, they lose their minds. I'm going to get married again. And, you know, and then they start making bad decisions in the women that they marry, because that is a big factor.
Yeah, I think you definitely have to be right in saying that both people have to be level-headed, should we say. Women do tend to get very emotional. I know my husband will probably say I get very emotional at times, especially when you've had children and you go through pregnancies and hormones and everything goes up and down. So that is definitely the case. And yeah, jealousy will probably play a part in that for sure. But I think for men also, and please tell me if I'm wrong, do you think that age and experience has a factor in that for men to go down polygamy in a successful way? Do you think, you know, if, for example, if a 21-year-old boy was to have two wives, would he have the same experience and mental capacity to deal with that? Or do you think a man of 35 would be, you know, better at handling that situation?
This is a good question. It's a hard one to judge. I'm going to lean towards there, because this is a lifestyle that has such a steep learning curve. I don't think it matters, because you'll have a guy, he'll have a very good, stable monogamous marriage, but he'll have no experience in maintaining a polygynous marriage. And that learning curve to jump from monogamy, even if it's 20 years, those same practices can carry over between households. But there's so many new factors that come into play that it's almost like being married again for the first time. So if a 21-year-old does it and a 35-year-old does it, I think they're on the same footing. Even if that 35-year-old has like 10 years of marriage experience, he's going to have a slight advantage, but not a significant one, because there's so many new rules and so many new, you know, I don't know if you want to call them rules. No, yeah, we'll call them rules that need to be learned and learned quickly. That the 20-year-old and the 35-year-old will, I guess the 35-year-old will have an advantage. Let me say that, because he's gonna have more life experience in general. If at 35 you're not good at being dynamic and you know, you'll learn it from work, you'll learn it from society and whatever else. You're gonna be more dynamic in adjusting to situations. So he probably will have an advantage over someone who's younger. But that's not to say that young people can't learn quickly also, because we see that, you know, mastery of skills and social skills and whatnot takes place in your 20s, so that you are the master in your 30s. So anything's possible. I don't know if that answered your question.
No, that did. It definitely did. No, you're right. I mean, it's not the same. And a person, like you said, could be perfect in their marriage with one woman, and then when they go to two, it's a completely different thing. So it doesn't mean that you will master that either. And I recently watched a video on your channel, and you were talking about, and I really respected this. You were talking about, mostly for sisters, about if you were in a, that situation where your husband had 2, 3, 4 wives, that they should focus on their relationship with their husband and not worry about what's happening in that house and that house and that house, and not expect the
Absolutely.
husband to come back and gossip about this wife and gossip about that wife. It's just not on. And I'm sure that that happens a lot. Because of course, a husband will go to one wife, but if you look at Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I don't think he did that. I think he kept every relationship separate. Everybody had their own respect. So I did really respect what you said in that video. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an important factor that a lot of people don't think about, and
Mm-hmm.
especially I don't know why. I guess maybe because it's the social aspect of females and the way they are. They really get involved in what's going on in someone else's household, and
Mm-hmm.
I think it's something that a woman has to take a conscious effort to train herself into. It's like, you know what, this is my relationship with my man. Let me focus on this,
Yeah.
and not try and look at what he's doing over there and make a comparison. It could be the case. It might actually be the case, and it does happen that the husband's being unjust and he's more he leans towards or he favors towards that other wife. But again, this is an issue between him and Allah. Make sure your relationship is the best that it can be with your husband. If you're not paying attention to what's going on over there, and I'm not saying that's just or it's fair, he shouldn't be like that, obviously, but
Mm-hmm.
if you're working on the best relationship you can have with your husband, and it should work out, the results should show. And if it doesn't, then maybe it's not the right husband for you. Maybe
Yeah.
I'm
No,
not, I'm not an advocate of divorce, even though I've had quite a few. Um, uh, you know, uh, you have to look at sometimes it's like, hey, you know what, this guy, you're just not going to get it right, or
mm-hmm.
this lady's not the right one for me. And
Mm-hmm.
so you end up torturing somebody, as a husband,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
yeah.
No, definitely right. What advice would you give to young Muslim men that are in marriages or looking to get married? What advice would you give to them?
If you're not married, be ready for a long haul search. Social media has really just capped people. When I say capped, I mean it's really just messed up their heads. Social media in the modern world has caused a lot of problems, just on an individual level, to the point that people who aren't married probably need therapy before they get married. So be
Yeah.
ready for a long haul search when it comes down to vetting,
Mm-hmm.
and just making sure you get the right person for you in your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's her right as Muslims to stay at home and be a housewife, and I would hope the woman you marry wants to do that.
Mm-hmm.
we know we know that a lot of women don't want to do that nowadays. They want to work and whatnot. And so if you're going to provide that value of life to her, to where she gets to live life, I like to say the life of a 5-year-old, and stay at home in the pajamas all day and eat snacks, inshallah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then make sure there is a reciprocal amount of not expectations, not the right word, but value being returned. And nobody likes to talk about this. I'm a fan of what's the word called, transactional relationships. When I say transactional, I don't mean that there's not emotions involved, but it's like everybody provides value. And I think this should be understood,
Yes.
that everybody provides value in a relationship. So make sure you're getting your value, because if you don't, this is why people, both men and women, feel cheated in a relationship. Oh, I'm wasting my
Mm-hmm.
time with this person. Why is this? Why is that? Oh, look at them. I do all this. The women do it, the men do it. So,
Mm-hmm.
that's the first thing. Be ready for a long haul search when it comes down to the proper and appropriate partner. If you're in a marriage, then again, just going back to what I was saying about focus on your marriage, focus on your relationship. It's very easy to get distracted and lost in red pill, this, that, the other, Instagram, this relationship's doing that, this one's doing this, that, the other. You got to find a way to compartmentalize your relationship in your life off of social media nowadays.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's really, really messy.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is how do I want to word this? Social media becomes a nice outlet, an escapism for people to ignore the problems of the relationships until they become a problem that can't be ignored anymore, which usually ends in divorce. And we know the divorce rate in the Ummah right now is just insane. It's not even
Yeah.
reasonably normal. And
Yeah.
this is all because I blame social media,
Yeah.
where people use that as an outlet to get their dopamine fixes, both male and female. And focus on your relationship, focus on your marriage if you want to stay married. have social media and whatever else, use it, but don't let it use you, and don't let it break your relationships.
Yeah, I think that you're definitely right. I mean, I've seen so many couples, when I look at their social media, they look like the perfect couple, perfect marriage. And then I've spoken to them, or I've spoken to the women, and I know that they've got issues going on, or there's things that are happening. And I think, oh, you're covering that with social media, like you said, posting pictures or going out, and you're not actually dealing with the issues in hand. And sometimes the main thing you have to do is put the phones down and have a discussion.
Yeah,
Actually talk to each other face to face. People don't communicate anymore. People don't know how to communicate anymore. It's really sad and really insane. They don't pray together, things like that. These really important things that you should be doing.
well, absolutely.
What about women? What advice would you give to young women that are marriages? And I'm sure you've got quite a few things to say.
I tend to keep it very simple, actually. It's like,
Yeah.
if you're not using social media for something productive, try and get off of it for a week. I caught a lot of flack for this. Sisters went crazy on me in my comment section, and I was with Mehdi Tajani on his Instagram, and they went crazy on me for it, which is a clear sign of that I was correct. If you're not using it for something, to spread a message, like yourself, you're using it to spread a message, or if you're not selling a product and you're not using it for something, try and cut it off for like a week or two, and see how you fare. And I think a lot of just women in general, Muslim and non-Muslim alike, they're going to find that they're actually addicted to social media, and it's going to be very difficult to break off. It's going to lead to a lot of negative attributes in their personality to come to the surface. I say this, and I start there, because this is the same advice we give men when it comes down to pornography. It gives men an unhealthy concept and idea of what intimacy between the partner should be. And in the same sense, social media does the same thing to women. You see, because this is where the whole saying that what is adult entertainment for men is social media to women. And so if a man breaks away from that, if he ever gets stuck into it, inshallah he doesn't, but if he breaks away from it so that he can have a healthy relationship, then at the same sense, we need to give women that same advice to break away from social media, to have a healthy relationship advice. Right now, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that needs to be looked at. Secondly, girlfriends that give bad advice. It's almost never that I hear, when brothers talk about their problems. I have a men's community. I'm in a few men's communities. I never hear brothers talk about, like, the first pull the trigger thing is you need to go back to your parents' house. You need to divorce your wife. It's so rare. Even in the worst case scenarios where there's like a very strong understanding that a man is involved. Not that they might be doing some, haram hanky panky, but it's just like there's clearly a guy in the picture, and men will say, hey, work it out, do this, do this different, try this, whatever else. And when a sister, like, her husband didn't buy her, I don't know, the jilbab of her favorite color, this week as opposed to last week, it's like, oh, he doesn't love you. You should leave him. You deserve better. Well, and it's like, whoa. Yeah. And so, pay attention to the advice that your sisters give you. Is it something that's going to help enhance and improve and better your relationship, which we find this entire self-help section of the internet Muslim men have taken on from the non-Muslims and red pill and whatever else. I'm not saying guys should go on red pill. That's not, don't misunderstand me there, but I'm just saying that's where that entire self-help, get better, do better, be better, this, that, the other comes from. But counterclockwise, or on the other side of the spectrum, we don't see that same thing happening in the women's zone. Actually, it's the opposite. Oh, he's no good for you. He's not this. He doesn't deserve you. You deserve better, blah, blah, blah. And so you have one group trying to improve their chances to be the best possible version of themselves. And I'm not dumping on women here. We have women here like yourself, alhamdulillah, trying to do the best for sisters and trying to get the best out. But what the perception is, let me say that, and it's very strong, especially on platforms like Twitter, is that the opposite stands true there. It's like, get rid of the guy, and guys are like, do this to keep the girl. And so I would say, watch your friends. Are they giving you advice that's going to help you?
I agree. And I think sometimes women want that social proof, so they end up with hundreds of friends and none of them are giving them good advice. I have two friends, and one is just a recent one that was a childhood friend I reconnected with. So and that's it. And I see them, every couple of months. It's not like I see them every day, every couple of weeks. They've got their families and their homes. I have my family in my home. But the thing is, don't discuss what happens in your home with them or with anybody in your family. I think that's something that women do a lot, is that I'm not going to use the word because it's a bad word, but they natter to those people, and they think that They say the word now is venting. I was just venting. I'm just venting to get out of my system.
Yeah.
But then that then creates problems because, like you said, people will say, "Oh, just leave him," or just walk away. And again, no, don't do that. Divorce is not the first option. In Islam, you should be doing everything to save your marriage before you look to divorce, especially as a
Absolutely.
woman. Like, as a woman, especially if you've got kids. You're completely right, brother. The divorce rates right now are insane, and it's really sad.
Actually, you made a good point there. It's like keeping your relationship private. One thing that a lot of people need to understand, and this applies especially to women, men less so. When you complain about your partner, generally they're not going to forgive him, even though you will.
Yeah.
Most of the time you find that a woman will complain about her partner and she forgives him, and then they love each other and they go back to their lives.
Yeah.
But
People
that
don't
complaint
forget.
stays with those people, those friends, the family, whatever else. They continue to just dislike him, and that's damage that's very difficult to get undone.
It's very
So
true.
it's best not to mention it, especially if you're not bent on leaving that marriage. If you're not bent on leaving that marriage, you're just venting. Get a diary, inshallah.
Yeah.
Vent there.
Yeah. That was great advice. Thank you. And I hope for any fellow Muslims, brothers or sisters that are in marriages or looking to marry, that helps you, inshallah. There's a connection between yourself and Andrew Tate, if I'm not wrong, before you converted to Islam. Can I ask how that came about and how did you feel about him becoming Muslim?
I first saw Andrew Tate. He just popped up on my timeline one day, and the guy was an amazing storyteller. He was talking about his adventures in London. I was rolling over this story that was like peppered with videos in between. It was hilarious.
Yeah,
And I started following
really
him.
animated. He's very animated in the way he speaks.
It was just hilarious talking about how he ran into a cokehead and the guy was supposed to take him somewhere. And then I was like, what the heck is going on here? It was hilarious. And I started following him. Then I just started like commenting on his stuff, whatever else. He started replying and whatnot. And at some point we started talking privately, and I can't remember why. And then one time he was like, hey, I'm in Germany. Do you have time to come through? I was like, bro, I said, let's do it. Well, actually, it wasn't Germany, it was Luxembourg. Right. And so my daughter had just been born like 10 days. And I think was it my daughter? No, it was my son. He was born, he's like 10 days old. And my wife was like, I want to go to Luxembourg too. I was like, well, you can't say what to do. She's like, no, I'll just go walking around and shopping and whatnot. So then just hopped in the car, drove up to Luxembourg. It was about an hour from us from where I was staying. And I spent some time with Andrew up there and Tristan. And I think, was his cousin there at the time? I think he was. And they were just talking about videoing everything, hiring a full-time video crew and whatnot. And so we hung out in the cigar lounge up there, some premium cigar lounge. And we just kicked it, and just talked about, just stuff. Then, then after that, we stayed in contact as always. This was prior to him becoming Muslim. And then it happened again. He was like, hey, I'm going to be in Germany this time. He's like, in Munich. He's like, can you be there? I was like, dude, you come to Germany. I'm walking out the job spot and I'm coming to see you, bro. And so I drove down to Munich again with my wife. She didn't sit with us. We hung out. No, actually, I don't know if she showed up that time. Anyway, we hang out in the Kempinski, and it's just like it was an amazing experience, to hang out with them there. And that was the time when that guy, there was like this treacherous guy who actually double crossed him. Some guy from Vice. He was actually there, and I met that guy while we were there chilling out in the Kempinski lounge. Very, very well-mannered, great dudes, wonderful guys. I still shoot him messages on Twitter. I think he just responded like last week. I just check messages on him, drop him messages like, hey, bro, assalamu alaikum, how you doing? This, that, the other. But he'd always been talking about Islam. And he told me the story about actually how he came into contact with Islam.
Right.
And so I never heard him tell the story before. I think I was probably the first person to drop the story because I never had his permission to tell the story, but it's not like it was some super secret thing where I thought he would have a problem with it. So he was saying like, the reason why I have so much respect for Islam is it's like, my trainer, he's devout Muslim. He's like, and that guy was like, always around me, training me and whatnot. He took me to world champion and whatnot. And apparently, maybe Andrew can correct me if he ever, I don't know if he's going to watch this, but I think he said he played a really big role in like, just helping with, the situation when his father died. Cause we know he's very close to his father, obviously by the way he tweets about it. He says, and this guy was really close to me when my father died. So it's like, he's like, I've always had respect for Muslims and Islam since then. To me, it always seemed obvious that he was going to accept Islam. his just interest in it, and just his natural. He has a very people really don't know him like they think they do. I'm not saying I'm like his closest, tightest homie. I'm not, but he's definitely not anything like the guy that they think he is on the internet. If you meet him in person, then his internet persona makes a lot more sense. He's the same guy, but he's not. The guy is so gracious, so polite. He's he's a real critical, clear thinker. If you talk to him, you can see him thinking about what he says before he says it. I've never known him to be a liar or anything that he said. The guy's just, top dude.
What do you think about everything that's going on? I mean, I feel for him, and may Allah help him and keep him safe, inshallah. How do you, obviously we can't don't want to go into detail anyway, because I don't want to add fuel to a fire that doesn't need any more fuel.
Absolutely, I understand.
But I agree with you in saying that the media are very good at twisting things, so I'm sure that he is not the way that people say. I don't know him personally.
I call BS on the story. Yeah. When we were, especially when we were at the Kempinski, what I definitely saw is this is a guy who doesn't need to kidnap Jesse James, whatever else, be forceful with women. There were women just coming and going and just trying to be in their orbit, in their circle. And it's quite clear that they would do a lot to be there. I think we understand what I'm saying. They would definitely, these are not guys who need to deal with any sort of force when it comes down to the opposite gender. We understand that there's just like women don't really have to, women don't have to be forceful with men because there's that clear dynamic where men are highly attracted to women. These guys live that life, but on the male side of the spectrum, so these are highly attractive guys in sense that in multiple ways, they're fit. I don't know if they look good. I'm not asking you to say it. I'm just saying, I would assume they look good and whatever else, they're successful. And so women were flocking to the Kempinski to come see them. I mean, apparently the word got out and there was just 2, 3 coming in, whatever else. And I was like, well, okay. I was like, man, what's going on here? They were more than happy to be there. These are not guys who have ever had to deal with force when it comes down to women. There's those guys you see, it's like, okay, you've got that creep effect. And you see those guys, it's like, oh man, here comes women. And that's them. That was them when I was there. It's not like they don't like women. It's just like, more. I know what you want. Leave me alone. You all want the same thing. So it's like these are definitely guys, as a guy who spent time around guys, you can say like, this is a guy I'd never let hang around my sister. And this is a guy I would let hang around my sister, and these are guys I'd let hang around. Well, I wouldn't let him hang around my sister because, Islam, that's how we're not are. But I think you understand the example I'm giving.
Yeah.
I call BS on the story. I call BS on the whole story. Somebody somewhere has a grudge against them, and it's being exacted now.
Yeah, and I hope it comes to a close soon and he can just move on from it. It's been a long haul for him, so inshallah, it comes to an end for him and his family. And I know he has children, so that must be hard too for him. Speaking of children, you have, how many children do you have? Do you mind me asking?
I have 10 children.
Wow, mashallah, you've got a lot of babies. I've only got 2, so I can't imagine the mental capacity of having 10 children. What's your experience of being a father, and how do you balance seeing them all, spending? I mean, I struggle with 2. I always feel like I'm giving one more attention, one less. So 10 is a big number.
I mean, the bulk of my children, 6 of them, they're like basically adults. Okay. So I talk to them, on WhatsApp and whatnot, crack jokes with them. We talk about gaming online, but we never do. So in that regard, with the older kids, I mean, I'm gonna start with now, since I'm just dealing with the younger kids. The 4 that are the younger kids now. I find it pretty easy. Alhamdulillah, I married good women who take care of the kids. I just go to work. I do my part. My experience? It's been positive. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, I'm very pro family. I love having kids. I love kids. I go motorcycle riding with my 4-year-old. We go out, we ride motorcycles together and whatnot. If I could do something with my kids, I'd do it. They're the people I want to hang with the most. If there's anything, I don't know why anyone wouldn't want to have as many kids as possible. It's just an amazing experience being a parent. I don't know. I guess I could say I don't know how to word it. I don't know how to put it in words. But being fair and whatnot, I mean, I trade between houses, and the children don't really have a house as to
Right.
opposed to the wives.
Right.
The kids can stay anywhere they want,
All
and
right.
that
Okay. So
happens.
they
They do
so they stay.
sleepovers and whatnot.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. So the kids from one mum come to the other
yeah,
house, and well, that's really good. So they are genuinely brothers and sisters that grow up in
yeah,
the
yeah, absolutely.
yeah. Do you have daughters? If so, how would you advise Muslim fathers and how they should bring up their daughters?
I have 4 daughters.
MashaAllah.
Um, it's a tough one
Mm-hmm.
because my first daughter, she grew up in a house with 5 boys. So her entire example
Yes.
was 5 boys. These
But
guys were
that's
just
good because then she must have known how men are supposed to be. She knew her role. I'm
yeah.
imagining.
She's very, when it comes down to emotions and whatever else, she's very, very just flat. She's it's
Like,
like, why are you so weird?
yeah.
But it's just because she grew up around 5 boys, and so her example is 5 boys in terms of like emotional control and whatnot.
Yeah.
So I mean, what's the advice for daughters? Make sure you have a lot of sons and raise your daughter around her. I'm
Yeah.
joking.
Yeah.
Advice for daughters. I mean, the only thing you can do is raise them upon Islam, and hope your upbringing is stronger than the dunya, and your partner is, of course, the number one example in that. So if their mothers, I don't know if it's a bad word. I hope it's not. If the mother's a dosser on Islam, then your daughter's going to be one too, because she's going to be the immediate and first, example.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, as a father, the children, daughters especially, also they want to please you and do what you want, but you can't have two people operating in two different directions, in conflict. So if the mother's not upon the religion and you're on the religion and you're trying to raise your children upon the religion and the mom's not, the child's going to be confused, because your marriage and your relationship is confused because there's no direction in it. So it's not a simple black and white answer in terms of advice to daughters or what to do. You just got to pick the right partner and then raise that child accordingly.
Yeah,
I don't
I
know if
definitely.
that answered.
No, that does. I definitely agree. I mean, before I had daughters, I never really thought of myself as a role model. I just thought, oh, I'll have girls and, they'll be fine. And then when I had my first daughter, I was like, oh my God, she's going to look to me and she's going to look to me Islamically. And I want her to be really close to the Deen, but I wasn't at that point, and it's when she was born, I was like, right, I need to get myself in check and actually look at
Absolutely.
myself. You think about having kids and it's about the practicalities, but actually it's about how you want them to grow, and especially when you have girls. So and I do a course and a parenting course, and I talk to a lot of Muslim families, and the big consensus is trying to bring up Muslim children in the West. And how do you do that? Where do you put them to school? What do you want them to be around? And our plan is hopefully, inshallah, putting them into Islamic schools. We've been to a few here that are wonderful. What are the schools like in Germany? Do you have a plan for that? Do they promote the haram physical intimacy like they do in the UK and the
They
US?
do. Yeah, Germany is probably at the head. They're probably leaders of it. And what makes it very bad here in Germany is they're so subversive. Is that the way to say it? I think that might be the word. They don't really tell you. You find out from your children,
Wow.
because they feel in Germany they're not, as a parent, you're not obligated, or there's no great benefit in letting you know what your children are being taught in the schools.
Gosh.
They're in school and that's it, and they're being taught. And so you find out through your children and the material they bring home what they're actually being taught. Sometimes even, then it's just some of the material doesn't come home, and so you don't find out. So it's very difficult here. Coming back on that, you just got to be the example for your children. This goes back to the whole dawah thing that we said at the beginning. If you're not your children's hero, you're doing something wrong. It should be like every time you come home, your kid you should be the rock star, whatever they're going, movie star or whatever musician is nowadays. That should how it be when you come home. Dad's home, mom's home, whatever else. And if you're not in that position with your family, then obviously you're not going to have any influence on how they're brought up, because you are more important to them than whatever's going on out in society. So be more active. Don't give them the phone and let them disappear into it and whatever else, to where somebody else becomes their hero in society, where they're constantly looking for a new hero, because social media leads them to have, the attention span of a TV commercial. So every week a new hero pops up, but you're the one consistent thing in their life. So make sure you're consistently there in their life in terms of activities with them. And I think that's probably the best thing you can do, male or female, boys or girls, daughters and whatnot, you can do to actually make sure that they stay on the path. Yeah. Because then if you're the hero, they're going to be like, well, my hero prays. That's my dad, or my mom, or this one or that one,
Yeah, alhamdulillah, we pray as a family. She's only 2.5, and once we finish our salah, she says, Mama more. And I'm like, oh, she wants us to keep going because she loves doing it. And she actually makes us do salah even when we don't need to. We end up doing more. So alhamdulillah, like you said, leading by example. And before I had kids, I would never even think about, praying. Obviously you pray your salah, but you don't think about praying more and more and more. You get through it, and your mind shifts for sure. I want to move to a different topic, if that's okay. You have a Muslim African American background, and that is the Nation of Islam. I did a video on this a while back. I'm not sure if you've seen it, but that didn't sit well with some members of the nation when I compared it to Sunni Islam. So I want to be clear, I have nothing against them at all. I was simply making the observation that they didn't practice all 5 pillars of Islam. Most notably that they consider a man, Minister Fard, as God in person, if I'm not wrong, which I said was shirk.
Shirk al-Akbar.
And I also must add that the nation have been inspirational to a lot of Muslims. Also, for instance, Malcolm X, Muhammad Ali, they have led a lot of Muslims to Islam. Growing up, were you influenced by them? What are your thoughts on that movement in general at all?
My understanding is, in general, that the Nation of Islam, they are non-Muslim. They are kuffar. They're not Muslims. Right. That's my understanding. Because like you said, they have shirk al-Akbar in their ideology. I do hope that they, come to, correct Sunni Islam, mainstream Islam. But my understanding is that, yes, they are not upon Islam. I do like how they attempt to instill discipline into the African American community. It is much needed in the African American community. I do my best not to mix with them.
Okay.
But it is a chaotic community, unfortunately, that needs a lot of work, needs a lot of change, dramatically, drastically. I like what they do there in terms of discipline, but obviously as a Muslim, I consider myself a Salafi Muslim to top it off. I find it very unfortunate that they do this upon shirk. Allah knows, may Allah guide them on me.
Yeah, I mean, I do hope so. I did get a lot of heat from that video, but like I said, I've got nothing against them, and I agree with what you said. They consider themselves Muslim, but some of their characteristics and the things that they follow are not strictly Muslim. So, may Allah guide them. Completely correct. I see sometimes you clash with some sisters online who are ignorantly trying to mix liberalism with Islam and use that to try to question halal choices you've made or opinions you have. And I also see tweets from you where you advocate for protection of all sisters and, how much you adore women. So it must be frustrating dealing with that type of ignorance. How do you think we can reverse this type of thinking in modern Muslim women? Can we reverse it at all? Is it to do with men? Is it to do with women? How do we stop this interfering in younger generations like our children?
Well, this is part of being in Western society, where Western society has become an invasive ideology in the minds of Muslims over Islam, in my humble estimation. I blame feminism for this. Feminism is a pretty, it seems to be a pretty pernicious and addictive force. I don't know what else to call it, but addictive, to where it's added this adversarial component between men and women, which obviously for Muslims means husbands and wives, that was not there before. When we look at the Sahaba, the Tabi'in, the Atba Tabi'in, and all this, we don't see that they had they maybe had differences, but it was nothing to do with gender. There was no gender differences between them. They didn't say, oh, well, it's not my job as a woman to wash the dishes or take care of the house or whatever else. I don't see any recording amongst the Sahaba, the Tabi'in, or, for several generations up until recently of, women having these discussions or men having these discussions that it was a problem. So it would seem that this is a modern issue. And I think this is part of the problem with moving away from Islam. I mean, I think we're moving away from Islam because obviously if we weren't, they were closer to Islam and the source of Islam and they didn't have these problems. So why are we having them?
Yeah.
So it's pretty obvious that part of that problem is feminism. And I ended up, I mean, sometimes I didn't help my own case. I was kind of like, what do you say? Controversial. I'd say some controversial things, online and whatnot. And people misconstrued that obviously in the great sense or heart of the ideology. There's a word I'm looking for. I use German so much now, I'm forgetting my English. But in the spirit of the internet, people seem to be determined to misunderstand you or to make up a whole new story based off of something you said. And somewhere in that came the idea that a guy with multiple wives hates women. And so now somehow that's kind of stuck and women seem to think that I hate women. No, I just want, I hold women to the same standard that I hold men to, which is just, look, we have our particular ways that we need to be. Men, you need to be the best version of yourself. Women, you need to be the best version of yourself. And so if I'm not going to hold back and, and pull the trigger, and shoot both barrels at brothers, then you can expect the same as a woman. I mean, you said you wanted equality, now you have it. So, and in that somewhere, because I wouldn't put the kitty gloves on for women, it was decided that I hate women, which is not the case. No. It's just, I think we're Muslims. We have the highest and the best standard that there is. And so we should stand to it, and I don't see a problem with being pretty, tough on that, if that's the right word, but no, absolutely no hate for women whatsoever.
No, I think that women and feminism and is sort of taking over the world. And when it comes to Islam, a lot of women who think like that, they think that women are oppressed in Islam and that men rule everything, and that men get to go out and work and women have to stay home. And that's not the case at all. If you actually look into Islam, if you speak to Muslims or Muslim women, so you don't need to speak to Muslim men, speak to Muslim women, and you'll see that that's not the case. In our house, I stay home with the kids just now and my husband works. If I want the option to go back to work, he has given me that option. And if I don't, he's like, I've got you, it's my job to look after you. You don't need to. So there's no oppression in the home.
Yeah, indeed. Absolutely. It's a pretty strange conversation we're having nowadays, because when we really look at it, and this comes back to what I was just saying earlier, it's like there's really no precedence for this entire conversation to take place amongst Muslims. It's really strange. It's like,
I know, because it's clear cut in the Quran. This is what men do and this is what women do. And for some reason, if for some reason this global culture has taken over, even Islam, who's got clear-cut rules, and Muslim women are now wanting to be Muslim men.
It's the weirdest thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's mad.
And I think the position and the role that women have in general in society, but especially Muslim women, is a beautiful thing. I mean, I was doing a series at one point where I was reading from r/space from Reddit, and it's just story after story. It's probably numbering in the thousands now, where a wife, or with the non-Muslims, a girlfriend would go to work, and then it led to problems in the marriage, someone cheating, the marriage falling apart. It's almost always like that. It's like, now you want to put yourself in an environment like that. It's like, obviously this rule of non-mixing and no free mixing, it has its foundation in the truth, almost like it's hidayah, almost like it's revelation. So I don't know why anybody would want to put themselves in those positions, those situations, because obviously we're humans, and the problems and the temptations are universal, and everybody likes to think, oh, it's not going to be me. I learned a lot about myself through marriage and the multiple marriages that I went through that I never thought that would apply to me. And so I had to come to the realization, and I hope that everybody comes to the realizations, maybe not so harshly, but they come to the realization that's like, sometimes you're not the person who you think you are. And sometimes you end up in bad situations, and that's when you find out. And you don't really want to be in those situations to find out, because now you're stuck with like multiple realizations. Like, one, okay, all I have left are bad decisions and bad choices. And two, I'm in those positions because I'm not the person. My ego has led me to believe I'm somebody I'm not. And everybody swears up and down. They're like, you know, Abu Iman, Iman, until they get in a position where it gets robbed from them. And, you know, you just don't play with it. You know, there's a reason why, you know, the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, had several hadith about staying away from this, stay away from that. Just stay away from stuff because you don't know how you're going to respond until you're actually in it. Theoretics are great. I've lived a lot of these problems and these mistakes, and I you know, I try to teach the people about them. And everybody's ego gets in the way of that. And it's like, okay, I've been there, and I've seen others who've been there because I've done one-to-one consultations with them, you know. And so, stay, sisters, if you can stay at home, stay at home. It's a beautiful thing, you know. It truly is. But that's opinion of a man.
Oh, I respect what you're saying, and I completely agree with you. I see it so much as well. And you know, before, you know, when I was younger, I would go to university and you'd be free mixing, and it's so easy to fall into traps. And not just that, it's, I think people used to say to me, when you get married, you know, you can't be friends with boys anymore, or you can't be friends, you know, your husband would never have friends who were girls, and you're just like, oh, it's fine, you know, because you're at uni and you're free mixing. You're like, I've got loads of friends in class and stuff like that. And now that I'm married, I would be uncomfortable being in another man's presence on my own without my husband. You know, of course, if it's family and things like that, that's different. But I've got no business. I've got no business to be hanging around with men. Even when I go to work, I'm very respectful. You know, I work from home. Well, I did before I had kids, but after I got married, if I went to work, and I'm very respectful. This is a man, I'm a woman. We don't need to be having coffees. We don't need to be, you know, we're keeping it strictly work. You know, I have my husband at home. It's very clear. And I've heard stories, like you said, similar, of women that go to work, they're not getting the attention they get from the husband at home, so they look to people in that environment, and that's, like you said, what leads to divorce. And you're right, sisters need to be, and brothers, but yeah, sisters do need to be mindful, because sisters do like attention, and sometimes you fall into that trap of just needing attention. And yeah, I've seen it as well firsthand from people. So yeah, I agree with you there. You're quite respected in the red pill and manosphere space, and a lot of Muslim men are supportive of it, you know, due to the way that political culture is in the West. And I definitely think there's positives and negatives to that space. So I agree when it comes to, you know, in terms of fitness, finances, networking, trying to be a man. I agree with that. Obviously, there's a lot of haram aspects that I don't really want to go into detail, but you know what,
for sure. Yeah.
You know about, you know, lots of women and things like that. I don't think that that's obviously the right way of going, and I think that can maybe get men to fall into a rabbit hole of what it actually is about, and it can start being about numbers instead of about, you know, how to be a good man. As a practicing Muslim man, what do you think about that space now?
I mean, I coined the term red pill rot. Alhamdulillah, nobody's stolen it from me just yet. And a lot of my concepts have been stolen. It's just a matter of time before this one's get stolen. I think the longer, I mean, I'd be a liar to say that red pill hasn't benefited me. But at the same time, it's an understand. There has to be this understanding. Guys, you need to understand that the longer you stay in that circle, the worse your ideology and your concepts of women are going to get, you know, because they spend a lot of time just talking about the negatives of women. And it's like, okay, sure, we need to know that no human is, you know, cookies and spice and everything nice, women included. It's good to know like their nature and how it is. But if you're just going to spend time there just figuring, like watching this stuff and consuming it and not finding ways to implement, like, okay, how does this help me in my relationship with my women? Then you're just going to end up in a nihilistic perspective. You're going to end up having a nihilistic perspective about women.
Yeah.
And if you don't mind me mentioning what you wouldn't mention, I'll give an example. It's like some guys, they go into red pill to learn how to be intimate with women, large numbers of women, because he's been an incel his whole life. And then he actually finds out, oh, hey, wow, this actually works. Until it comes to the point where he's like, okay, there are no women out there who are loyal because he got good at what he was looking for. And so now in his mind and in his heart, he can't trust a woman because of his experience that he got from red pill. And now you have guys going through that entire cycle without ever having actually experienced the intimacy part of women. And when I'm talking about Muslims, so Muslims, they'll come into that circle, they'll stick to the religion, alhamdulillah, they won't go out and do anything haram, but then they'll start picking up this ideology that the women can't be good, they're no good, they're you know, they're they're gold diggers, they're all cheaters, she's gonna cheat, this, that, the other. A brother asked me on my channel, yeah, Abu American, should I start saving for my divorce now? And I'm just, what are you talking about? What are you, this is red pill rot, to where it's like the ideology becomes so pervasive in your mind that you can't think outside of like, how bad women are or whatever else. And it's just like, it's, this is why I wrote the vetting guide, because it's like women aren't bad. You can filter out bad people. There are methods. We have entire systems from police force to psychology to whatever else to filter out and find bad people, and recognize patterns and behaviors. And we can't do the same when it comes to relationships. Obviously we can. That's why I wrote the vetting guide, so what you focus on is what you find, and so, it has some benefits, but the benefits, they're exclusive to red pill, like get fit. Why wouldn't you want to be that version of yourself for yourself and your partner anyway? That's irrespective of red pill. Get your money together. Why wouldn't you want your best money, so you can give your family the best that they can have in terms of what's permissible from the dunya, so you can make Hajj and pay for Hajj for yourself, your family, whoever else. Maybe you can afford to pay Hajj for someone who can't go. Get your money together. Get your, all these things that they talk about in the positives, you can have irrespective and separate on its own from red pill, So I don't want to dump on it. I have a lot of friends, as close as you can be as a Muslim with non-Muslims in that circle, like Rollo Tomasi, if you don't mind me mentioning his name.
No, I was actually going to ask you, what do you think about Muslim? Do you think Muslim men should listen to people like Rollo Tomasi, Myron Gaines, who's Muslim?
Myron, I like Myron, but I his message is kind of interesting the last couple of days. I don't want to crap on him because I want to leave the door open to dawah.
Of course,
I would say right now is probably not the best time to be listening to him. He's been saying some stuff that you have to be intimate with a certain number of women, 50-something women before you can really understand women or whatever else. It's just strange things for a Muslim, for a person who identifies as Muslim, to be saying. Because I don't think he's talking about getting married and divorced 50 times,
No.
So, it's like these types of messages. Muslims, what are we going to do with this type of information? How is this going to benefit us? It's not. No, learn how to get it right early on, from the start, and you won't have to go through 50. If you're experiencing anything 50 times and you're not getting it right, you probably should be staying away from that altogether. I'd get fired from my job if I had to do a job and I had to do it 50 times to get it right. They'd be like, dude, third time, you're probably going to be out of here.
And I've heard that it gets boring. I've heard that people, I've heard men say that once they fall down that path, it almost becomes like an addiction, and then they just get bored, and it's like you wasted so much time and energy, and and women are starting to act like that now, and it's a really strange business.
It has its own share of problems.
Yeah,
that I've seen in some guys.
Yeah, and I definitely think people should be careful who they're listening to, what they're listening to, because people are not, the Quran. They're not Hadith. They don't know everything. So follow that, and that'll lead you down the right path. But you're right, brother. Yeah.
And if anybody's just to be clear, I don't really listen to any of that content. I mean, I like Rollo. I don't listen to his content. I talked to Myron back in the past. I don't really talk to him anymore. I don't listen to his content. I don't listen to any of these guys' content. So
yeah.
If anybody's out there thinking I'm listening to these guys, whatever else, and I'm just regurgitating it, on my channel, it's not correct. Mm-hmm. Most of my concepts, a lot of my concepts came from them, but most of my concepts are original ones because of the unique situation of Muslims.
Yeah. And then, like you were saying about Muslim men that are trying to find the right woman, or just men in general that have maybe fallen down that path and now have trust issues, and they're trying to find the right woman. You mentioned that you've got your vetting guide, and obviously I recommend anybody who needs help to definitely hit you up for that. Do you have any advice for them, lastly, just to finish off, brother? Just briefly, anything that you can say for men that are struggling?
Guys, if you're struggling, oh man. Okay, first off, don't be nihilistic about women. And I'm gonna sound, guys are gonna, so now we're talking red pill and everything, guys are gonna think, oh, Abu American, you sound blue pill beta. I'm gonna, but understand I haven't gone blue pill beta. But let me just say, in their own right, understand this in the proper context, in their own right, women are absolutely amazing creatures that in their own right, in their own specific way. And it's an amazing thing to have a woman in your life. Everybody got mad at me about the shoe tying video and whatnot and pictures, but it's like these are concepts that to us as men are absolutely foreign, but because they, my wives at least, they derive pleasure from making me happy. This is not something that we as men can wrap our heads around. So when you find that person, when you find that woman or whatever else, dude, your mind's going to be blown to the level of what she's going to be willing to do to make you happy. So be the best version of yourself, because you owe it to yourself first and foremost, and you owe it to whoever's going to come into your life, so that she's like, yo, that guy right there, Allahu Akbar, she's going to be like, I landed the one,
Yeah.
So if you're not that guy, she can't be that girl. So make sure you're that guy, because you're going to find that like women will ditch feminism. I know this for a fact. I know this is real. They'll ditch all sorts of crazy stuff. This whole, Little Miss Independent story stuff. They'll ditch all that if you're that guy. So be that guy.
That's all women want. They just want protection. They want to have a leader. They want someone they can trust. You're completely right. Yes.
So be that guy, and everything else will work itself out. It's not that cut and dry, but
yes, I know what you mean.
That's 60-70% of the work.
Yeah.
And and then you've got like guys out there willing to help you with the rest, inshallah. If it comes to that, but I don't think it will.
No.
I don't know if that was clear.
Yes, very clear. Thank you. No, it was very clear. Thank you, brother. And I hope that really does help someone out there that needs it. I really enjoyed having you on. I enjoyed this discussion today. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for taking the time out to speak with me. May Allah bless you and your family, inshallah. And I hope you have a beautiful day, everybody together in the one house, inshallah. You have a nice day. And inshallah, I'll speak to you again soon.
Inshallah.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum, brother.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum.